Thank you all for joining us today. Oh, I'm seeing participants loading in by the scores. This is great. So welcome to our August webinar, where we're going to chat about desert ecology and also the restoration of degraded ecosystems and all kinds of exciting topics related to arid and semi-arid land management. So just up front to talk a little bit about our attendee guidelines. You may notice that as an attendee, as a participant today, you're going to be muted for the duration. That's just to help us improve the audio quality and to let the panelists have a discussion, but we do want your interaction. There's a chat function and you can feel free to post comments there. We'll have people monitoring that. However, if you have a question that you would potentially like our panelists to answer, there is also a Q&A function, and you can put your questions right into that. So feel free to converse with other attendees. I'm going to open chat right now because what I like to see is where people introduce where they're from. And so I'm hoping that everybody here would feel free to let us know just where you're coming from. I see there's folks from Tunisia and South Africa. We pretty rapidly will see almost every continent represented. And Dr. Elaine and I are still holding our breath for someday seeing Antarctica on there, but we'll see. There's a lot of folks from the desert southwest of the United States. That's not surprising to me with this topic. So very fun. All right. I'm going to go on just to mention a little highlight of today. So we're going to go through the introductions of our panelists today, and in particular, we're going to highlight Kseniia and Ashleigh, who are here to talk about some ecosystem restoration related topics. So we'll have some presentations from them about these projects, and Ashleigh is here to talk about the first ecosystem restoration course. Which is part of our partnership at Soil Food Web with the ecosystem restoration camps. And then we'll have a chance to do a Q&A session. And we have prepared a little bit of just general panel discussion that we'll start off with. And then our tech crew will be loading in questions from the audience. So please feel free to use that Q&A function. So these are this is our crew today to chat about this topic. So I'm going to go around. I'm going to let them go around and present a little bit about themselves as well. But you all are probably familiar with Dr. Elaine Ingham. We also have John D. Liu on the call today. Kseniia, Ashleigh, and myself. I'm your host. So please, Elaine, starting with you, just tell us a little bit about where you're coming from and why you're here.
Well, I'm a soil microbiologist and have worked on the soil food web. I was in the group of folks who put that food web together, not just, like little boxes in a straight line, all the connecting dots that occur, lines that occur when you're dealing with the food web, who eats who and where do they end up. So putting together those soil food web pictures, trying to understand that. What does it mean for plant production? Well, there are 7 overarching principles that the organisms in the soil food web will utilize to help your plant. You need to know what it is your plant requires with respect to balance of bacteria and fungi, protozoa, nematodes, microarthropods, earthworms, the whole shebang. So there's quite a bit of understanding that we still have to garner. And so looking forward to working with ecosystem restoration camps to gain even more data about how does nature do this? And so how can we model our human ecosystems after the natural? So, yep, on to John.
Hello. Well, I'm John Liu, and I have been a journalist and professional observer of politics, economics, culture, and then I found ecology. And when I found ecology, I became obsessive. And I decided it was more important than anything else I'd seen. So for the last 30 years, I've been focused on ecology. I have many films and things, writings and films that I've made. So they're available on my academia page, which I can share with you in the chat. And I also founded the Ecosystem Restoration Camps movement. And I have to thank the Common Land Foundation and the Mustard Seed Trust who make it possible for me to continue to do this work. So that's me. So
Excellent, thanks.
Kseniia, yeah.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm very excited to be here today. And yeah, my name is Kseniia. I am originally from Russia, but currently I am located in Cairo, in Egypt. And it's already been 1 year when I have joined SEKEM, that I will tell you a little bit about later. And I have quite a holistic background. I would say that each of my job more or less was connected with solution to climate change, because this is my passion. Like I started from solar energies, and then I went to sustainability consultancy. But in the end, thanks to John and his documentaries and articles, I found out that ecosystem restoration is the most beautiful and logical solution to climate change, and that's why I'm very excited to be joining to this project. And yeah, I really hope that this movement will expand in the upcoming years and it will grow more and more.
Oh, you're up next, Ashleigh.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ashleigh Brown, and I'm the education coordinator at Ecosystem Restoration Camps. I live in Devon in England, right on the sea front, and I've been involved with the restoration camps movement for about 6 years, since I watched one of John's documentaries and it totally changed my life. And I reached out to him on Facebook asking him how I could help. And here I still am 6 years later. And my role is mainly finding ways in which everyday people can learn techniques for how to restore ecosystems. So I give the camp partners advice on how to design ways in which people can come and learn, and then also creating online offerings as well to teach people how to restore different ecosystems. And I'm very excited that we're working together now with the Soil Food Web School. We both had the same dream at the same time and just so happened to find one another to create a whole online school full of different courses that you can take to learn how to restore each and every ecosystem that we have on our beautiful planet. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And I just have to say, I'm mostly here as an enthusiast today. Some of you know from other webinars that my background and training is in soil ecology, and so I'm not a desert ecologist, but I love deserts. I love the beauty and the biodiversity that they contain, and so I'm very excited to be part of the panel discussion today, and just to learn from our presenters. So without much further ado, let's move on with that. Kseniia, you're up first to tell us about SEKEM.
Yes, thank you so much, Adam. So yeah, once again, my name is Kseniia, and I am Sustainable Development Project Manager in SEKEM Group. And first of all, SEKEM is quite a crazy organization because it contains a lot of entities under its umbrella, including several private companies. We have several NGOs, even Heliopolis University. And the headquarters of SEKEM, they are located in Cairo, but we have projects and farms that are located all over Egypt. The main focus is biodynamic agriculture, and yes, today I would like to tell you of one of such projects that's called Greening the Desert. So yeah, and first thing that I want to mention that here I won't talk about ecosystem restoration, but it's rather called ecosystem development from our side, because as we will discuss later, the desert ecosystem is not really damaged, but it's mostly seen like a poor ecosystem that we want to develop into something new and to enhance biodiversity and to bring life into the dead landscape and bring more jobs to people. Yes, and going to the next slide. First of all, I would like to show you a short video that will get you a little bit familiar with what is SEKEM, what is Greening the Desert project about, because like we say, it's always better to see one time than to hear it 1,000 times.
Creating out of nothing. That is probably the most suitable way to describe what happened in the past 42 years on a piece of desert land 60 kilometers from Cairo. In 1977, Ibrahim Abouleish returned to Egypt, where he saw the amount of challenges that Egypt was facing at that time. Feeling the pressing need to change something about this, he established the Initiative for Sustainable Development, SEKEM. The unbelievable vision of Ibrahim Abouleish became reality. More than 2,000 people are living, working and learning together in a peaceful and diverse community. And now, SEKEM is inspired by what emerged already and on its way to create another community in the western desert of Egypt. After around 4.5 hours of driving on a dusty desert road, the landscape is opening up and reveals the Bahariya oasis, a source of life in a harsh desert environment. Around 35,000 people, mostly descending from Bedouin tribes, call this oasis their home. On the outskirts of this oasis, half an hour from the village Hara, where once was nothing but sand, you can find the SEKEM Wahat farm, which is home to the Greening the Desert project. 10 months ago, we started our campaign for the reclamation of 63 hectares of desert land. And a lot has happened since then.
Thanks again to all of you. We are grateful that all of this could happen in such a short time. Our unbelievable goal of reclaiming 63 hectares of desert land in 1 year became reality. We are now taking the last 2 steps. We are connecting the third pivot and installing the last missing solar system. The 63 hectares will be cultivated using biodynamic principle. But your contribution is serving much more than just sustainable agriculture.
Wahat is still in its early days. Different people are joining the journey of creating this young community. And we already started to think about how the future could look like. We want to establish an open, intentional community where people come together to work with a shared vision of a brighter future. The vision for our farm in Wahat is shared with the vision that guided SEKEM through the past 42 years and shaped it into what it became today.
With this project, we want to set a concrete example of how many opportunities we have today and how can we use them to make a change for the good to the world. My name is Randa, I am Egyptian, and I also want to do something good for my country. With this message, we want to tell you that we decided to continue and want to take you with us on a next journey to raise another 400,000 euros. There is much more desert land to reclaim. We invite you to join us and thank you very much.
Yeah, this video was shot 2 years ago, and the data that is given here is a little bit outdated.
Creating out of nothing.
I will update it a little bit later. And now, first of all, I would like to tell you a little bit the location itself of our camp. It's located in a place that's called Wahat Bahariya, or would be Bahariya oasis in English, but we mostly call it just Wahat farm. And it's located roughly 400 kilometers from Cairo, which takes it somewhat about 4 hours driving by the desert roads. And it's a place that has an area of roughly 2,000 kilometers squared and around 3,000 people of population there. And yeah, so the income for the people from even pharaonic times, agriculture was one of the main activities in this oasis. That's why it's one of the reasons why we want to enhance these activities more and more, because still till these days, though it's not that active and intense as it was before, agriculture plays a major role in the lives of people there. And yes, and of course tourism as well. So regarding the geological conditions, sorry, can you go back to the slide, to the previous one? Yes, so regarding the geological conditions, Bahariya oasis is a natural depression, which means that from the top you will see it as like a ball that is surrounded by the hills. And try to keep in mind this fact, because later I will tell you about one project that we launched just recently, where we are taking advantage of these geological conditions. And yes, regarding the climate there, it's a typical desert, very arid climate with little to zero annual rainfalls. And looking at this map, you will see that Bahariya oasis is located very far from any on-ground sources of water, such as the river Nile or the lakes, which brings us to the next slide, where we're going to talk about water situation in Wahat, which is one of our major challenges so far. So the water source of in our camp and in the oasis itself is the underground Nubian aquifer, which is the largest aquifer in the world. And on this little map, you can see how it's spread between 4 countries, which is Libya, Chad, Sudan, and of course Egypt. It contains roughly 150,000 cubic meters of water. And nowadays, approximate calculations of researchers say that it will last for at least 100 years more. And because it's not naturally replenished, because it's not connected to any other underground water sources. So this is one of our challenges of alternative irrigation systems, alternative water sources that we are researching right now. Yes, a little bit more about this aquifer. So basically the main problem, as you can imagine, is that the water level is gradually going down each year. And for example, before 1960s, there were known more than 300 underground springs. Sorry, can we go back for a second? Yes. So there were around 300 freshwater springs that existed in Wahat, and nowadays almost all of them are gone, because the groundwater level now are between 20 and 70 meters underground, which means that for any agricultural activities, or of course like wells for people and living source, the constant pumping is required. Yes, and to the next slide. Yes, so welcome to our camp. A little bit information about this. The area is 1,000 hectares, out of which 1/3 is currently, I would say, reclaimed by us. There are quite a lot of people in the camp daily, 50 employees, which works there permanently, and 30 seasonal workers, roughly, depending on the time of the year. So this area was purchased by SEKEM in 2008, but because of mostly political and economical reasons, because there were revolution in 2011 and there was also economic crisis in approximately the same years, we didn't start, we actually couldn't start any major and intense reclamation activities there. So all the work and all the achievements that I will tell you about in this presentation, they were reached in 3 years, because only in 2019 our major work was started there. Yes, and to the next one. Yes, here you can see how approximately it looks like. So our Wahat farm, if you look at it from a hill, it looks like green circles of life in the landscape of a desert, because local desert doesn't have a very noticeable crops or any nature, any major species that you can spot with the naked eye. So you can see before and after shots on this presentation. And I will want to tell you a little bit about crops that we are growing there. To the next one, please. Yes, so as I mentioned, only 3 years passed since our reclamation activities took place there. And as you can imagine, for the desert landscape, it's almost nothing. So far, the land there is not very well developed, and percentage of soil organic matter is still lower than 1%. And we are not able to grow something, I would say, more serious than the herbs, which takes most of the area in our farm. So mostly we are growing our crops with biodynamic practices, which is similar to organic agriculture, practices that take the whole system, including soil, plants, animals, holistically, which means we are not bringing negative impact in order to enhance positive one, but we are treating everything equally. And besides the herbs, we also planting trees that mostly currently playing a role of the shields from the desert arid winds, and that protects our crops from the artificial pesticides and other chemicals from the nearby farms. And yes, so regarding the species of the trees, we are trying to mix native species with other ones that can withstand local desert conditions and doesn't require that much irrigation. So the native species include olive trees and palm trees, and the one jojoba trees became very popular recently because of the jojoba oil that started to be very popular on the market. But still, it's mostly our trees are too young to have a nice harvest from them. So still, they are mostly playing a role of these tools for more intense carbon sequestration, and also, of course, for the purpose of enhancing biodiversity. Yes, and going next. And yes, of course, talking about biodiversity. So last year we conducted studies for the biodiversity baseline studies on our farm, where we compared desert landscape with our landscape on the farm. And as you can see from the numbers, we have a very nice impact on flying insects and the birds that find their home in our trees, new planted trees. So of course, a very high increase by biodiversity in plant species. So far, we planted around 350,000 trees on our farm, but our dream goal is 1 million. And also, I would like to mention a very nice project that is going on there right now, which is conservation of endangered native Limarki bees species. That in the recent decades, population of them are declined, and the species are very nice because, first of all, of the ability to withstand desert climate, and second of all the all the vitamins that contains in the honey. And going to the next one is, yes, so this besides the herbs that we sell for other companies as a raw material. Also, we use in our own companies for production of organic teas and spices. So one of our major incomes is generation and sale of carbon credits. Last year, we generated about 14,000 carbon credits with the help of, so the sequestration methods are aligned with UN CDM methodology. And we sequester carbon with the help of trees and soil, and carbon avoidance going with compost and solar energy panels. All the profit from carbon credits is going to be reinvested into Wahat camp expansion. And of course, we are aware of this criticism that's going about carbon credits, that it's seen as it can be used as a brainwashing mechanism in policy of some companies that want this to be aligned with policies of the countries or states. And that's why we are trying to sell our carbon credits only for the trusting companies, to our friends that we know for sure already take a lot of efforts in reduction of their own emissions. And in case if they want to invest in this type of products as ours, and they want to offset and go net zero on the paper, we are selling carbon credits to them. They are very welcomed. And yes, one thing about the certification of our carbon credits. Before, it was certified by a well-known golden standard, the German certification body. But through years, we started to see it as more a bureaucratic thing, because it doesn't make a lot of sense for the people, for experts to come from Germany all the way to Egypt just to look at our farm for a couple of days and sign some papers. So instead, we decided that it can be done by local bodies as well, and that's why we switched to Economy of Love certification standard. And because it's a very new standard, I would like to tell a little bit about it, because a lot of questions arise in when we mention the standard to other people. And on the next slide. Yes, so what is Economy of Love standard in the first place? It's a ethical and sustainable certification standard for a range of organic products that provides a transparent overview on the whole supply chain, from the farmer to the producer of any kind of product that is certified by it. And how does it work? Let's say you are coming to the market and you see a bag of tea that is certified by Economy of Love standard, and this bag of tea will have a QR code that you can scan with your phone, and it will direct you to the website that will show the whole supply chain that you can dive into. It will show you where the raw material for this tea comes from, who it was produced by, where is this specific farm is located. You can see even the face of the farmer. You can see the interview with him, and you can see which income he will get in case if he will buy this bag of tea. And so yes, it's basically it's a tool that will allow to the farmers to get a fair income, and also for the customer to make a responsible choice, because instead of going and, let's say, buy a bag of tea of Lipton that you have no idea where it comes from, you can actually see the impact of your own decision, and to decide like if you want to invest your money in this type of product or in that type of product. Yes, and besides this value chain impact tool, sorry, the previous one once again. Yes, I just wanted to mention that just this year it decided to have its own methodology for carbon credit sequestration and certification body for it that goes aligned with all ISOs. And yes, it's very transparent as well, because you can also see where these carbon credits are coming from and which type of agriculture this farm is using. Of course, it will be organic or biodynamic agriculture, not conventional one. And in case if you want to learn more about this standard, you can go to the economyoflove.net website and read everything and all the documents there. Yes, and then on the next slide is, of course, because we are all very concerned about climate change problem, we want to reduce our emissions to the zero on this farm. And we are quite close to this goal, I would proudly say, because nowadays, during the daytime, all the activities, including irrigation systems and solar pumping, they're going 100% on renewable energy. However, our challenge right now is with nighttime irrigation, because as you can imagine, it's much more efficient than daytime irrigation, because no evaporation takes part during the nighttime. But however, because we don't have batteries for condensating of solar energy, because they're quite costly and also not that environmentally friendly, during the nighttime we use diesel generators, and that's what we really want to change. And as you remember in the beginning of presentation, I mentioned the geological structure of Wahat oasis, and that it has natural elevation all over the place. And our farm is located right next to one of such elevation. So basically what our idea is about is to place a big reservoir on the top of this hill. So during the daytime, the water will flow from the irrigation system to this reservoir with the help of solar energy panels. And during the nighttime, with just gravitational flow, it will go to the central irrigational system. And so far, we're not going to use any other energy source besides the gravitational natural one. And we are very excited about this project because we already received the fund for it. And the construction of it will begin, I think, in the upcoming month. And it will be done by Heliopolis University students and plus some local labor. And in case of success, it's as it's going to be only a pilot project. In case of success, we can distribute this idea among the neighbor farmers that have the same geological condition, and even the farmers outside Egypt. And this way to solve like the problem of energy consumption. Yes, and going to the next slide. Yeah, another thing I would like to tell you about is Ecosystem Research Center that is located on the territory of our camp. It's quite new. It's still in, I would say, prototype phase, but we already have one project going on there that it's called Farm for Climate project. It has two main goals to achieve, and one of it is to see how basalt delivers to carbon sequestration if mixed with compost and applied to different crops. And another goal is we want to motivate all the neighborhood farmers of Wahat oasis to go to switch to regenerative agriculture instead of conventional one. And how are we doing it is that we offering them assistance in joining Economy of Love standard, so they can actually generate carbon credits on their own farms, and so far receive additional income to the main one. And beside these two projects, Ecosystem Research Center is playing a role of a contact point between Wahat Camp and Heliopolis University, where our students can go and taste their theory like on a big playground. And beside this, just in the June of this year, we had Willem and his team from Common Land arrived to our camp, and where he offers actually a very crazy and ambitious idea is to implement 4 returns framework on the scale on the whole Wahat oasis, which would be awesome. And that's another point where we need this ecosystem research center connection with, let's say, outside world, because Wahat oasis is a very isolated system, and we need more experts and more stakeholders to take part in this project. And yes, the next step so far is a kickoff event that will take part in October of this year with the major stakeholders from Wahat farm plus several ones outside Egypt. And yes, let's see how it's gonna go. Besides all the agriculture activities that take part in Wahat farm, one of our major goals is community development, because basically what we are doing there is we creating communities from scratch. And to do it, of course, it's impossible to just to invent a camp where people will live and work every day without any leisure or side activities. So that is why, for example, one of our main places on this camp is a theater, where we are trying to bring some cultural activities such as musicians or actors to perform at least a couple of times per month. So people would have some cultural leisure activities there. And beside this, we are trying to make this camp as autonomous as possible. So we built a health clinic on this area that also serves people from outside the camp, from the local communities. It has a school for the children of Wahat as well. So far it has 30 students. It was started last year, and this year we built a new building from carbon neutral materials, and it's gonna start functioning in September. So very excited about this. And it has its own bakery, it has its own compost site production, recreational area, of course, where people can just chill, watch some movies, and have a campfire and talk around. And one other interesting things is community-based learning program that is held in cooperation with Heliopolis University. And what is community-based program is basically, it's when students from university with backgrounds in economics and engineering and physical therapy are coming to the camp, to the community. They talk and cooperate with local community. They discover their challenges, and they're trying to apply their theoretical knowledge to solve these challenges. And it's basically where students meet their real life, and everyone is very happy about this, because besides just applying their knowledge, they learn, of course, they learn a lot from the local people. They learn about how to actually use their knowledge in real life challenges. And it's basically one of the things of the main, I would say, program where they understand what sustainability actually means. Because still for many people here in Egypt, sustainability is connected mostly to ecology, and they don't understand it as a holistical approach in general. So with the help of this program, they actually can see how everything is interconnected, how for organic agriculture students, they see how people interact with ecology, how it flows into economical aspect, and so on and so far. Yes, and last but not least is, of course, the activities outside the camp. There are so Wahat Bahariya is very famous for its attractions such as Black and White Desert, which has just unbelievable landscape with very beautiful geological structure. Especially, it's impressive in the sunrise and sunset time of the day. It also, like, for the tourists, one of the main activities, the most popular one, is Bedouin experiences, where you can join just local Bedouin tribes that will take you and show you how they actually live. They will take you to the middle of the desert. You will sleep on the stars and listen to their music, and they will prepare the local tea and just have a chat with you in case you speak Arabic, of course. Also Crystal Mountain, which is basically a mountain that is covered with crystals, like the name says. And because the oasis is such a distant place from everything, I would say it's not really touched by the modern civilization. So when you come there, you feel like you are kind of traveled in time, and you located in like in the times of from the times of pharaohs. Basically, you will see some very interesting historical sites. So this is another reason why people are attracted to this place. Yes, and basically this is all I wanted to tell you about. And just as the last thing that I want to mention, that because we are always in the process of development of our camp, we are constantly looking for the volunteers. So in case if you're interested in joining such a experience of living in the farm and taking part into greening the desert, you're mostly welcome, and you can contact me or Ashleigh. You can see the contact on the next slide. There will be a list of our websites. Yes, it's better. Yes, as I mentioned, it's better to mail me or Ashleigh, and she can redirect it to us. And you are mostly welcome just to visit us and to see how the things are going on there. And yes, thank you so much for your attention. And let's go to the next panelist, I guess.
Awesome, thank you so much. And I just want to remind everybody in the audience that we have that Q&A function. So if you have questions that you'd like the panelists to address, I've seen a few of those pop in there, but please feel free to do that throughout the presentation. And I'm excited to hear from Ashleigh next about the first ecosystem restoration class.
Hi everyone, thanks for your presentation, Kseniia. SEKEM is an incredible project that I was lucky enough to go and spend some time with a few months ago. So yeah, I'm sure we'll have a very hearty discussion about that a little bit later on. I'm going to talk about the ecosystem restoration camps movement and just give you a little bit of an introduction to it. And then I'm going to go on to talk about the first course that we're creating in collaboration with the Soil Food Web School called An Introduction to Ecosystem Restoration. So the ecosystem restoration camps movement, it was created after John had a recurrent dream about people coming together and camping and restoring the ecosystem that they were camped upon or a nearby one. And this was an idea that was kind of percolating out into the world 6 years ago, and many people were drawn to it, me being one of them. And now, 6 years later, the movement is a reality. There are 52 camps all over the world, and we together are restoring thousands of hectares of degraded ecosystems. The structure of the movement is that there's a Dutch nonprofit registered in the Netherlands, obviously, and then another one registered in the USA. And those two entities are run by a very lean team who have different areas of expertise and specialization to give local restoration camp partners access to different resources and services. Where we also link the camps with one another to support learning exchange, knowledge exchange. So a camp in California can give advice on controlled fires to another area of the world that is also experiencing wildfires and has a similar fire ecology, such as parts of Australia. That's just one example. And all the restoration camps are locally led and locally initiated entities of their own. So it's a very decentralized, locally embedded way of doing things. Next slide, please. So yeah, this is 4 infographics that explain the purpose of the restoration camps. So obviously they exist to restore degraded land, but not just land, there's some oceanic ones now as well. And to create innovative ways to restore, regenerate, rehabilitate degraded ecosystems. Because one of the things that makes a lot of the camps special and important and valuable to the world at this time is that they offer surrounding landowners ideas. Giving Camp Altiplano in Spain as an example, it's a 5-hectare plot of land that is not being farmed commercially, and so because there isn't the commercial sort of pressure to make an income from the land, although the land does make an income, it means that we've been able to experiment there with different ways to restore and rehabilitate that piece of land in a way that we're still growing the same kind of cash crops as the surrounding landowners. So we can take risks, we can make experiments, some will fail, some will succeed, and that learning can then be taken out to the wider ecosystem of landowners and farmers who have who don't have the same wiggle room to make experiments and fail. So that's what we call a living lab, a living laboratory. And then of course the camps can share these learnings with each other as well. Camps are also experimenting with different ways in which ecosystem restoration, regenerative agriculture can be profitable on a smaller scale, oftentimes than super large farms. So that's also really interesting. And a lot of camps see themselves as lighthouses, so places for people internationally and locally to come to sort of start small and then build out in terms of ways in which we can do life differently, because it's not just all about ecology, there's a lot of social aspects to it as well. Next slide, please. So I'm giving you an example here of one of the restoration camp partners called Mombasa Mangroves in Kenya. They are working along a creek and giving employment to people that live in the slums along the creek. So they're getting a lot of money from donors, also a lot of carbon credit funding, because mangroves sequester double or even more than of carbon dioxide than tropical forests. And they are creating a lot of jobs for local people whilst restoring a very valuable ecosystem. And so far they've planted 550,000 mangroves. Next slide, please. So here is a map of all of the restoration camp partners around the world. In 2017, there was only one, and now there are 52. And our aim is to have 100 by 2030, but I imagine with the speed of growth, we will surpass that quite quickly and easily. But you can see that they're spread all over the place. Could do with some more in Asia and in North Africa, but yeah, there are many, and you can, many of them are open to visitors for you to go and learn, take part. So check out opportunities for that on our website. Next slide, please. So yeah, you probably won't be able to read this very easily because the text is pretty tiny, but this is an infographic that shows how the camps movement has grown over the last 5-6 years, and how we have purposefully designed it to be this way so that we can have the biggest impact possible with the smallest amount of resource. So the first camp started in 2017 in Spain, and it was people were attracted to come and take part in trialing this new idea I was one of those people. I lived there for a year and firsthand was led by an expert, Ramesh Kent, on how that piece of land can be brought back to life. The idea then caught on, and more projects sort of came into the fold and called themselves restoration camps. And one of the key things that we did to enable fast and rapid growth and scale of the movement is, rather than creating new projects from scratch, projects that already existed that weren't necessarily doing ecosystem restoration or regenerative agriculture, but they had the right facilities, the right staff, and they had a desire to do restoration as part of their work, joined the movement and then added the restoration element onto what they were already doing. Which has meant that we didn't need the money and the time to create something from scratch, because frankly, we don't have the time for something like that. We then focused on creating IT systems that would allow us to serve as many projects as possible without having a massive team and high overheads, which is what we've been working on over the last few years. And then since then, dozens more camps have joined us and started to collaborate and teach and learn one another, till we've gotten to where we are now. Next slide, please. So this is a slide that shows the impact that the camps have had over the last 5 years. They've planted 1,714,892 trees and plants. Amongst the 52 of them, 8,567 hectares have been restored or are under restoration, but there is the potential within the movement, if enough resource can be, galvanized, to restore 3.1 million hectares. There are 60,000 people who know about us on social media. 459 people have taken our first restoration course that we started in 2020. That's online. And 16,685 people have visited our restoration camps thus far. So we're pretty happy with these numbers. So those of you who are familiar with John and John's work will probably recognize this phrase, the great work of our time. And what he means by that is that ecosystem restoration, regenerative agriculture need to become the defining work, that the defining purpose of humanity at this moment in time. And that's why the camps movement was started, so that we can make ecosystem restoration the defining, act of the human beings on Earth right now. And the reason I've put this slide here is because it's all very well to offer opportunities for people to travel and go and visit a restoration camp, but there are many people out there that, for one reason or another, can't travel or can't really get out of their own neighborhood to do this work. So we need to train people and offer them opportunities to learn how to restore an ecosystem on their doorstep. And one way of doing that is through online courses. Next slide, please. So we are working together with the Soil Food Web School to create a course called Introduction to Ecosystem Restoration. And the reason that we feel like this is a really good time to create and put out this course is because there is a really growing interest in ecology around the world. It's the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration this decade, and more people are becoming aware of the power that restoration can have to rebalance our planet. Right now, we all agree it's totally out of whack. And whilst we do need to rapidly decarbonize our economy, we also can very much recalibrate the very out of whack world that we live in by pouring love into our degraded places. But a key missing piece is people don't have enough ecological literacy. We didn't get taught it at school. A lot of us didn't grow up in a culture where we were encouraged to, understand ecology and how ecosystems work. So this course was created in an attempt to resolve that. Next slide, please. So I'm very excited about this course, and I want to share the excitement with you. Why is this course so exciting? Well, you'll gain a key foundational understanding of ecology, the basics of ecology, how an ecosystem works, that I believe to be needed to start a career in ecosystem restoration. So this is a really great course for anyone who wants to restore an ecosystem now or in the future, and needs somewhere to start to get the foundational knowledge. You'll be able to learn it from a highly experienced restoration ecologist who's been working in restoration ecology for 27 years, and he has experience of multiple different ecosystem types, of which he talks about in the course. This is the information you should have been taught when you were 16 years old at school. So I'm happy that that we can revisit that era now. And hopefully one day soon in the future, schools will teach this. And understanding the different types of restoration will give you an introductory understanding of how restoration works. So yeah, these are the building blocks of a restoration career. Next slide, please. This is Paul Morris, the guy I was telling you about, looking very happy in a temperate mangrove area, which is really cool. I've already spoken a little bit about him, but he came into my life, or we came into each other's lives, because he runs a restoration camp himself in Mexico. It's called Earth Connection, where he is restoring with his team a dry tropical forest in the Yucatan Peninsula with his company called Planet Healers. And he has a YouTube channel with lots of videos on all of the different restoration techniques that he talks about. And he's very excited to have the chance to share his knowledge with you via this course. Next slide, please. So this is a little overview of the student experience, if you're curious. The course is 16 weeks long. There'll be one lesson per week, and each lesson is 2 hours long. So there'll be 2 hours of video lectures, but each lesson is broken up into 15-minute chunks. So you can, slot in a 15-minute chunk in the morning whilst you're eating your breakfast or in your lunch break. It's been designed to be very flexible so that you can just take little bites of it throughout your week. There's a 1 hour Q&A with Paul every week. So if there's anything that you didn't understand or you'd like clarification on, Paul will be there. He'll also be available to chat to via a forum where you can also interact with other students too. And there'll be a course manual which will give you the opportunity to go deeper into some of the subjects that Paul has mentioned in the course. Next slide. So now I'm going to give you an overview of what each of the modules covers. So module 1 looks at why our Earth is struggling. What have we done to our ecosystems around the world? What have we done to the processes, to Earth's processes that has caused the sort of impacts that we're seeing today? He teaches you about the living and non-living elements, the biotic and abiotic elements within an ecosystem that affects how it works. He then looks at species from the cellular level all the way to a whole population, and then how species within an ecosystem interact with one another. Next slide, please. The second module goes into more depth about how ecosystems work, with a specific emphasis on the energy cycle. So what eats what, essentially. here's a picture of a food web. So he goes into a lot of detail about how the different species kind of pass energy to each other through this food chain, food web. And then he also explains the different geochemical cycles and nutrient cycles that the earth has, and how that works within an ecosystem, how those can be broken, how those can be restored. And then he also goes into ecosystem functions and services. Next slide, please. The third module is about ecosystem restoration. So the term ecosystem restoration refers to a science and a practice that helps to reverse the degradation of ecosystems. And that can actually cover quite a broad range of techniques and activities, which is called the restoration continuum, which was designed by the Society of Ecological Restoration. So you'll go through the continuum and you'll learn what each of these activities are that come under this umbrella. He'll also teach you about the principles of ecosystem restoration. So what are the key things that you need to do and focus on to restore an ecosystem? And then he's going to show you some highly degraded ecosystems and talk about how to restore them. And what I'm really excited about in module 3 is that Paul is going to go into an ecosystem with his camera, and he's going to film himself sitting there, showing you around, introducing you to the different species living there, physically showing you what the degradation looks like. And he's going to try and do that in as many ecosystems as possible. And I just think that's really cool. Module 4, please. Next slide. He's then going to talk about ecological restoration in module 4. And ecological and ecosystem restoration are not quite the same thing. Ecological restoration is a science and a practice that looks at native ecosystems using native species. And he will talk you through exactly how that process works with the standards from the Society of Ecological Restoration and the leading practices that restoration practitioners are using now. And then he's going to give you an introduction to how to restore the ecosystems that we find in temperate zones and the ones that we find in tropical zones too. Next slide, please. So this course has been designed to become the first stepping stone on a pathway towards becoming an ecosystem restoration practitioner. So you can see the Introduction to Ecosystem Restoration, or IER course, is down at the bottom here. So when this is all new to you, this is a good course for you to take. Then I am going to be working with the Soil Food Web School to develop a series of advanced programs that are each 4 months long, that will help you become much more knowledgeable about how to restore a particular ecosystem. So say you live in one of the tropical parts of Brazil or Mexico. You live in a tropical zone and you want to learn how to restore a tropical forest. You could take the IER course and then go on to take a 4-month course specifically about restoration of tropical forests. Or deserts, or I know this is a desert webinar, so we're going to be creating a 4-month course on restoring deserts and drylands. Then we really recommend you go off out into the world and do some on-site training. So you visit a restoration camp, or you go to another restoration project and you put into practice what you've learned online. And then there's the leadership training program, which will teach you the skills that you'll need to run your own restoration project. So not just about the ecology and how to restore that ecosystem, but also skills that you'll need to run your own project, like fundraising, business development, team management, project management, how to find and acquire land, how to register a legal entity, etc., etc. So there's a lot of work coming up for me, but this is a dream come true, and I really hope that this speaks to some of you, excites some of you, and will help you on your path towards becoming a restoration practitioner or a restoration camper, or just one of the many millions of people that we need to restore our beautiful planet. If you'd like to reach out to me, I can put my email in the chat, because I love hearing from you. Yeah, thank you for this platform, and good night.
Thanks so much, Ashleigh. Wow, this is exciting. And you know, I've got to say a personal note here before we jump into our Q&A and panel discussion. I had the privilege of teaching undergraduate restoration ecology for several years. And so the fact that you're talking about teaching principles related to what the Society of Ecological Restoration is saying and referencing all these other things gives me a lot of confidence about the materials that you're teaching, that they're going to be top-notch, state-of-the-art stuff. So I can't wait to take the class, and maybe I'll learn some new things about desert ecosystems along the way, right? So thank you so much for sharing that. As promised, we'll have Q&A, and I know that a lot of our participants have loaded in some questions, and our tech team will be putting those in here. But I wanted to start with a little bit more of an engaging, like, panel discussion where there's not going to be one right answer, right? But it's worth grappling with. They're very complicated questions. So I actually anonymized a couple of comments left on one of our Facebook ads. And in this particular one, I'll leave it up there so that folks can read it. A desert ecologist who I communicated with on private message about this to get a little bit more context, you know, is really concerned about the way people look at desert ecosystems when we use the term deserts, as if they're all just wastelands waiting for some human to come along and make it useful. You know, and it specifically mentions the Sonoran Desert and all the biodiversity that exists there. And so I wanted us to talk a little bit as a panel, like, get your reactions to the concept of desert ecology and our value of desert ecology, and just these ecosystems, what they bring, their intrinsic place on our planetary biodiversity scale, but also this looming crisis of desertification and our need to go into areas that have been highly degraded and do this kind of work. So I don't know if anybody wants to volunteer as tribute to start, but I would just love to get people's take. John, I see your hand.
Well, yeah, I have been working in different places which have been desertified, and I have also been studying in naturally occurring deserts. So there's a huge difference between those two different kinds of systems. And I think what we're seeing is that human impact has an understandable trajectory, and so does evolutionary succession. So essentially, what we see is in evolutionary succession fundamental principles, which I would call natural laws. So if you break these natural laws, then there will be quite serious consequences. And the thing that we see is that it's complex, but it's not impossible for everyone to understand it. You just have to consider the concepts of symbiosis. So you have multiple systems. You're not talking about water just as water. You're talking about water which is absorbed into the earth and into the soil, but it's also uptaken into the plants, and then it's respirated by the plants. And if you have all the pieces of a functional ecosystem in place, then you have a microclimate where the moisture cycles below the canopy. And you also have temperatures that are mitigated, so the solar radiation doesn't directly hit the surface of the earth. So the difference between the temperature when solar radiation directly hits the surface of the Earth and below a vegetative canopy can be enormous. So I've found 45 degrees centigrade differences by measuring and going out to deserts. This is extraordinary, and it's that you can artificially alter that. So we're worried about 1.5 to 2 degrees centigrade global temperature averages in ambient air, and basically we're finding huge differences in surface temperatures below the canopy or on exposed soil. So we can all do that. Every human being can participate in this. And I think what we also have to understand is that there's a fundamental mistake that's going on in our economic thinking. Because if we're calling the things which we humans produce the basis of wealth, but at the same time that's causing the degradation of the ecological systems, then actually it's not a positive thing. It's bankrupt from the word go, and ultimately ends up collapsing the system, and there is no productivity. So what I've seen in my observations and study is that productivity follows function. The functional ecosystems are the primary systems. And in doing this, I've noticed that actually there are places which are acupuncture points on the earth, where over historical time, human beings have degraded them. And so your beautiful crust lichens and crusts that grow in Utah and in the other beautiful natural deserts, they're also being destroyed. And driving a giant four-wheel drive vehicle across one of those, which took millions of years to establish itself, is a terrible thing, because it takes millions of years to create that crust. But what we're seeing in other places like the Sinai in Egypt is that this was the land of milk and honey. And we can't just say, well, that just magically changed, because we can measure the impacts, and we can see the moment when there was a change that led to the desertification of the Sahara and the Middle East, and massive changes in the Mediterranean. So we can also see in California and in the whole coastal forests of North America that we know that in less than 200 years, 95 to 97% of those wonderful coastal forests with 4,000-year-old trees, 400 feet tall, were cut down. So there's only 3 to 5% of that remaining. And I was just talking with a scientist in Australia, and he told me that there were rainforests on the coast of Australia, and that moist air blew in until European immigration to Australia, and that those forests were from the sea continued in 100 miles into the interior, and then moist air blew continuously, and then it rained every day in the interior of Australia. So, there's this kind of evidence, and what we see is, if we don't understand the scale, and if we don't understand that every person who is on the earth has a responsibility to understand this, and that when we understand this and we act, we change the landscapes. So if we're ignorant and greedy, we change the landscapes and they desertify, or they're degraded. And if if we understand it and we act in another way, we can restore ecological function. And so this is what excites me now. And then seeing the explosive growth of the ecosystem restoration camps suggests that actually all we have to do is say and get everybody to understand this, because once we have this consciousness, of course we want to act this way, because it means our children and future generations will have functional ecosystems. So I think this is the key part, and we can look at fascinating, the biodiversity, the soil is all very fascinating. It's infinitely fascinating. So once you start going in this direction, I think you become very obsessive. I know I have. And, you know, I think this is more and more people are going to feel that. And then when we do that, we're going to influence everyone. We're going to influence the people who grow foods, because you can't justify industrial agriculture or the use of toxic chemicals in agriculture when you understand that that's counter to evolutionary succession and actually ends up destroying the earth. So, you know, we're going to have this possibility to have more and more people. The more and more people who join this, the more and more the politicians, the policymakers, the people who have large capital formations, they have to pay attention. And finally, we have to recognize that everyone is equal and that many people have lost their basic human rights. And how did that happen? Well, we know how that happened, but it's not a good thing and we can't let it go on. And so we have the chance to address this now. And if we don't, then we're having more and more billionaires, but billions of desperately poor people. This is just unacceptable. So we need to change the things we can't accept, instead of thinking that we have to accept the things that we think we can't change. And so let's, you know, we have this potential, and it's the lowest cost and the highest impact. And it's based on people, and this is the moment, because we're in crisis. And so if we don't do this, we already are seeing what the impacts will be. Sorry for ranting a little bit, but thank you.
I think we all appreciate your rant, and I think maybe Dr. Elaine has some key tie-ins to what you're saying as well from the soil food web perspective, because when we talk about function and restoring function, that's something I hear her say every week. I don't know, did you have a comment you wanted to add here, Elaine, or something different on this topic? Oh, you're muted though.
I can contribute lines anywhere you want. When we start to look at landscapes and the successional process that goes on, almost, well, if you take a look at the biology in the soil, you realize that what's going to happen above ground is being widely distributed. That information is being sent through everything going on in the soil. So that function comes first before the above ground is going to show a distinction, because the above ground then changes because the bacteria and fungi, protozoa, nematodes, all of that food web in the soil, because that changed first, then the plants change. But then when those plants have changed, that's going to alter the biology in the soil. And eventually that leads to a whole different set of plants in your plant community. And so that whole successional process definitely relies on what's going on in the soil. And most people didn't recognize this. And pretty much the whole morning went by and very little was said about, we've got to understand the biology in the soil. If you don't understand that part, you'll always be behind and you won't be able to catch up with Mother Nature. We've got to put all of this information in together so we understand what that normal successional species changes actually were below ground and above ground, below and above, below and above. When you get out to desert systems, we've got to have a system where we have the water being held in that soil and not being allowed to drain from that soil. Most places that are going to be deserts that have absolutely no organic matter, no biology in them to speak of, they're going to be in that condition for a very long time. You have to have the below ground organisms move into that system and start building structure in the soil. That's the only thing that's going to hold on to the water that you're pumping and pouring into these places with irrigation. If we put the biology into the soil and build that structure, you would not lose that water. And so you keep it in the ecosystem, you keep it in the soil, the organic matter has to grow. Usually we look at about 3% organic matter is the minimum that you can have in order to hold the nutrients and hold the water in the system. How far down do the root systems of desert plants go? Well, it's quite some distance because it's got to get to that water that was being held down at 10 feet, 20 feet, 100 feet, 250 feet. And so we have to have that structure rebuilt. Who does that structuring of your soil? It's the bacteria, the fungi, the protozoa, the nematodes, the whole group has to be eventually present in that soil. So there's a different level of health in each step of that successional process of going to old growth forests in desert systems. It's happened in the Sonoran Desert when we're looking at the cactus. The saguaro cactus is just exactly like an old growth forest made with consisting of cedars or pines or redwood trees or what. It's the old growth version in that dry area. But it's the wettest. It's the most biologically diverse because that's what defines an old growth forest. But you better have the biology in that soil. Fungal to bacterial biomass ratios in around the root systems of saguaro cactus is going to be somewhere up around 10 to 100 fungal biomass per bacteria. And that is another one of those defining things that tells you that this soil is in the condition of health to be able to support the growth of old growth trees. You try to put old growth trees into the second or third or fourth stage of succession and you're going to watch them die because the biology in the soil is not correct. And they can't cycle nutrients, they can't get the nutrients, they can't hold on to all of those 7 overarching principles I talked about in the introduction. So I'm looking forward to having a lot more hands, a lot more eyes on data, coming to those of us who want to sit down and analyze that and then be able to tell you what Mother Nature has in the soil. What do we need to add into that soil so that we get the stage of succession that we want? Now, do we have the right to do that? Well, I think we want to make certain that there's every stage of succession in your watershed. We know catastrophic disturbance is going to happen. It's going to happen someplace. And so we want to know what that, and I just, all these little things going ding, ding, ding. What, am I supposed to quit now? Is that what that means? So we want to know how much of our watershed needs to be in early disturbance stages. And we have to have enough of that. So when catastrophic disturbance happens, we've got the species of bacteria and fungi and protozoa and nematodes and microarthropods and earthworms and all of those critters, spiders and shrews and mice and voles, whatever is normal in your ecosystems. We have to have representative because all of those organisms perform a function. When we get to a later stage of succession, we better have some of that in our watershed so that those organisms can colonize into the rapidly returning, catastrophically disturbed 20 years, 30 years. How soon, how rapidly can we take a completely disturbed, no biology left in that dirt and turn it back into an old growth forest? So we've got some work to do, and I look forward to working with all of you to get us there.
Excellent. I think those dings probably came from my computer and it had nothing to do with you. And it's not like the music at the Oscars trying to get people off stage.
Right.
I did want to say, I love that we're having this discussion, and I do want to give Kseniia and Ashleigh a chance to chime in here, but specifically on biocrusts, we had Dr. Christina Young speak at our Soil Regen Summit earlier this year, and those replays are available for people who are able to access that website. Maybe we can put that in the YouTube comment section or something. And she talks a lot about biocrust and succession and these ideas that you're saying, Elaine, that succession can look different in a natural desert system, but it's still got a lot of the same patterns there of those things that colonize early and then things that build on those things and how that changes. And it would just be, I hope nobody walks away from this conversation thinking that we just consider all deserts to be, worthless, because they're super valuable. And yet there are a lot of places where we can look and say, at one time this was thriving, like John brought up with Australia, and then humans did their thing, and then it turned into a desert. So restoration, ecological restoration, includes that historical reference, understanding that idea about what we're trying to go back to. And your vision of successional patterns is really helpful in that. And it wasn't hard for me when I started working here to say, as below ground, so above ground, so below ground, so above ground. They're linked, and we would forget that at great peril to ourselves. So, Kseniia or Ashleigh, did you have something to say on this, or should I go on to the next discussion point?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't have much to add because there was said a lot about this issue, and yeah, I just think that with the current level of desertification in the world, just the meaning of what is good and what is bad. I mean, in the Egypt, for example, it's around 95% of desert land, comparing to 5 where actually something can grow. And we are not taking just a random place in the middle of Sahara, it's exactly what John said, that for thousands and thousands of years, this place was used by people as agriculture. So there was a community that formed in this place. So I guess, yeah, though, and again, it's not a desert that is flourished with great levels of flora and fauna. It's just basically an empty space, and what we are trying to do there is just to bring more biodiversity and bring more variety to the local crops, so to support living system of people and of course animals and plants there. So this is my position, and but this question is indeed very good, because I also sometimes think about how is it seen from a global perspective when you interrupt into one ecosystem to change it for your own purpose. But I think it's about the intention that lies behind it, that we are doing it not to gain some profit from it, but mostly just to bring more life to it.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to bring up this other comment, which I found to also be quite interesting, and then we'll go on to some more direct questions. But This individual says that something that nags them when they look at some of the movements around the world, especially in regenerative agriculture, which we consider the Soil Food Web School to be part of that movement, is sometimes the word natural or nature is thrown around, and when we're really talking about an agricultural system. And it's just like the importance of defining these things and what our goals are, and what I think Dr. Elaine really brought up something important that says, like, on a larger scale, on a watershed, we just have to be more intentional about land use. And there's a space there for lands that really utilize, productive, hyper-fertile soils to help deliver food for people. And there's spaces, especially sensitive spaces, that we might need to leave alone. And there's other gradients of management. So I see that Ashleigh has a point there to make. So I'll stop talking and say, what do you all think of this?
Yeah, I think where deserts are concerned, there are two types of desert that I have learned about over, the course of the last 6 years from working with the ERC, especially working in somewhere like the south of Spain, that has for a very long time been an oak savanna sort of ecosystem. So patches of oak forest with juniper, Mediterranean style forest with grassland. And the particular area in Spain that we have been working on is becoming a desert, due to agriculture over many, many, many years. There is little organic matter left, and the soil, if you can even call it that, is white colored. And I found that really shocking when I moved there, because I always thought that a desert was just a place that was an ecosystem of its own, and was that way because nothing to do with human beings. Whereas actually there are natural deserts and human-made. I'm purposefully not using the word man-made because it's not just men. Human-made deserts as well, and they're two different places. And where SEKEM is concerned, I've been to the place where the places that SEKEM has been regreening or greening, and there's nothing there. Like, maybe there are beings living there that I didn't see with my naked eye, but not even native plants or plants that traditionally people call weeds. Whereas with the irrigation going in, it's made water available to native plants that have then emerged alongside things that have been planted there. And then that has obviously attracted native insects, and then that has attracted birds, and the whole trophic cascade food chain has erupted back to life again. And that to me feels like a good thing, that's for sure. And I wanted to show you that. I don't know if you can really see it. It's quite dark here now. This is a piece of petrified wood that I found in the desert on the way to visit the site that Kseniia told you about. So it's a piece of wood that is so old that it has turned to rock. But if you look closely at it, you probably can't see it, you can see the grooves of the wood. And so this is an ancient relic of a forest that was present thousands of years ago. And there's loads of little pieces of this all over the place. So this, I don't know, this feels like an almost sacred object to me. And I like to have it by my computer when I'm working. Just as an example of, what we can get back to. And I don't advocate for natural deserts being changed, but there's so much of the world, I think it's about a third of the world now, that is in a desertifying state. and that is going to cause a lot of problems. And so I think that's something that we should be working to reverse. And also the last little point of this comment, we humans are the ones invested in creating hyper-fertile soil and growing calorie-rich foods, not nature. This comment is saying that human beings are not nature, and that's something that I don't think is true.
Well, I think we really need to become like nature. We need to understand the way nature would do things. And there are no nutritionally poor and only fit for dedicated herbivores in a natural ecosystem. Not the case. As soon as you get that biology in the soil revved up and functioning, as soon as all of those organisms are in place, that plant is going to be one of the most nutritionally valuable. When we as human beings come in with our toxic chemicals, inorganic fertilizer is death to most of your organisms in the soil. Pesticides, death to your organisms. So, you know, we overwater and we expect that we've got aerobic organisms still in the soil. It's kind of, we need to pay attention and do what nature does, not what the history of mankind has been telling us to do for the last 2,000 years. So we need to get a good understanding of what we're really doing.
I love that you made that point, and I see this all the time. There's a famous quote by Aldo Leopold that says, the consequences of an ecological education is that one feels that they live alone in a world of wounds. And I see this woundedness on our planet. I drive by, you know, on the road, and I see an invasive plant taking over an area, and I think about the loss of biodiversity and all. So, you know, some of the oldest definitions of nature in the world that come out of ancient philosophies, from Taoist traditions and other things, my understanding is that they're very specific about nature is the thing that self-organizes, right? And then the human comes in and says, let me reorganize to suit like my needs.
Right.
But
I know better.
Right. But what Ashleigh said, it really resonated with me, this idea of ecological literacy, because that need not be the state of humans and nature living, you know, symbiotically together. That we can look at these processes in awe. We can be curious about them, the way that we've all expressed interest in finding answers here together. And we can say, there are many places on this planet where, because of our previous issues that we created, the ecosystem no longer can self-organize in the same way. We've degraded its capacity to self-organize. And so that's why we need this great work of our time that John talks about, to go in there and understand, how can we get the system back to a place where it can self-organize, where it can be, you know, holistically resilient against stress again, instead of being these fragile areas that we're just watching bleed out like from these wounds. So, I mean, that's my own soapbox, because I was asked recently on a radio show, what do you want for people to do in the face of climate change? And I was like, I want them to fall in love with the natural world at all the scales, at all the places, from deserts to wetlands, and from the sequoias to the tiniest microbes. I want them to fall in love, to be in awe of it. And then we can learn from its wisdom. I don't know if that helped facilitate discussion, but there we go. John, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, I might just mention that in what's going on with the Sinai restoration, we have taken quite a lot of samples of the soil and done analysis, not only of the sand, but of the sediments that have gone into the lake. if you guys are interested in this, there is a Cosmos Journal article about this, but basically what we've seen is that everything is necessary to restore the soils, and we can also restore the water, and we can also propagate and plant out the legacy genome. So this means that if we get our mind around what our task is, that we have a shared intention that we need to have, and many people have not thought about this because they were thinking like, what can I do to feed my family or take care of myself or get my house or, you know, whatever it is. And so this is a different thing where we start to say, well, we're not going to have an economy. We're not going to have, our families will not be protected unless we restore ecological function on a planetary scale. And so that's where the kind of situation is, where we're now, there's quite a bit of depression or nihilism in the society. And so many people are unhappy. And I think what we have to do is we have to get happy. We have to fall in love. It's absolutely true. And in order to do that, we're going to have to see that actually what we need as individuals are what everyone else needs as well. And so that if we make sure that everyone is able to pursue their heart's desire, then actually we're going to be in a totally different space. But we have promoted this idea of just accumulate more material possessions. But it finally is just junk that ends up on the trash heap. And then we have, in 1,000 years, the archaeologists are going to go, what were they thinking? You know, there's like a huge layer of junk just at that particular moment in human history. It's bizarre. And so if we can get to this place where we're able to think about the symbiotic relationships, so the soil microbes, the fungal systems, the plants, the water, the physics are changed by having shade. You know, once we understand these kinds of things, that they're not like, we can't talk about them separately, because in fact we need them all in order to have it. You have to have the organic material, which is creates the habitat for the microbial and the fungal communities. So if you don't have that, and that's basically necromass. So we have biomass, but each generation of life dies and gives up its body to nurture the next generations. So we basically need to understand that and then work together to make this happen, because nobody as individuals or institutions or countries or corporations or anything can possibly do this. The only possibility is humans working together as a species. And I think there is some weird evidence. I don't know if you have been looking into bonobos, but maybe study primate research and see that our closest ancestors were bonobos. And they're like, I think chimpanzees are 97% DNA is the same, but bonobos are like 99% the same. So in ancient literature, in ancient myth, there's a golden age where people remember living in harmony, and there was no war. It's like before the fall from grace in the Abrahamic thinking. So, you know, this is a rather interesting phenomenon, because if somewhere in our DNA is a memory of no war, no anger, no suffering, well, you know, maybe we should, you know, we're listening. If I turn on the movies or the news or the advertising or the PR or the political propaganda, whatever it is, it's dystopic. I think we just need to kind of simplify and have fun and do what we know we need to do. So we know whatever's going to happen, we've got to restore the soil fertility. We've got to restore the hydrological. We have to protect the biodiversity. And actually, we can do all those things. We're capable of doing all those things. And so if we choose to do this, then that's going to be the future. If we don't choose to do this, the future looks pretty grim right now. So let's get on it, and more camps, more people. And there's another step after camps. I think this is an important thing. Camps are a low bar. Go camping, take it easy, but it's more like dating than getting married to people you just met today. So go learn how to restore the earth and find out the people that you want to spend the rest of your life with, who want to have the same values and want to do the same thing, and then make eco-villages. And from those eco-villages, and make sure that the camps just keep doubling and doubling and doubling again until there's just camps covering everything. And then from the camps emerge eco-villages, which are more like towns. And I think we need to not protest or confront the powers that be, because they're in extremists now. They're collapsing and falling down, you know. It's a good time, as Woody Allen would say, it's a good time to strike. The leader has no head or body, you know. So from Sleeper. If you haven't seen Sleeper, watch it. But well, it's probably not politically correct to say anything good about Woody Allen these days, but anyway, funny movie. Anyway, that's enough from me, and thanks everybody for coming.
Can I make one more point? A couple of people who have sent in chat messages saying basically that desert soils don't have enough minerals in them required for active soil life. And that is absolutely not the case. There is no soil on this planet that lacks the nutrients to grow plants. Nothing, nothing can't grow. Double negative, that's a good one. So what's going on when you put out seeds and you can't get those seeds to germinate and grow? You can't get the nutrients that are there into a plant available or a soluble form for the plant to be able to uptake that nutrient. So how do you get the nutrients that are in the rocks, the sands, the silts, the clays, the pebbles, the boulders, the parent material, all of that in the silica bilayers? There are plenty of every single nutrient you want to talk about. But how do you get them out of the rocks? You have to have bacteria and fungi with their enzymes directed by the plant. The plant tells the bacteria and fungi what enzymes to make to pull those nutrients out of the silica bilayer in the sands and silts, the clays and rocks and everything else. So now things are in the bacterial and fungal biomass. That's still not available to a plant. So you have to have the predators of the bacteria and fungi come along, eat the bacteria or fungi, and because the concentration of nutrients are so much higher in bacteria and fungi, that those predators have to release the excess nutrients that they just consumed. And that is released in a form of those nutrients that your plant can take up. That's how nutrient cycling works in soil. And you have to understand that's how it works. Or you keep messing up and saying, I got lots of bacteria in here. Why are my plants dying? Because you got to remember the predators. So there over and over and over again in our studies of soils, there are these kinds of problems. People just didn't bother learning. When I was starting my PhD work at Colorado State University, I went around and talked to all the soil science people, and to a man, every single one of them said, oh, you better not do that research project on fungi, because nobody hires anybody who's just a mycologist, They saw no reason to learn anything about these microorganisms. And they are the only way we are going to be able to stop killing ourselves. We've got to get those organisms back.
That's wonderful. That reminds me of another Aldo Leopold comment where he says, it is absolute folly to look at something in nature and say, what good is that? Right? So the fact that they ignored so much of the tree of life by saying, those little tiny things, who cares?
They can't be important. They're so small. Yeah, but there's a bazillion of them.
Well, I'd like to pivot in our last 8 or 9 minutes here to some direct questions that have come up. And this one is, to all the panelists, but lessons that have been learned about selecting appropriate plant species for desert restoration projects. And I know, Kseniia, you spoke about some of the species that you chose, which probably had both an ecological and an economic reason behind them. But did you have any thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak, of course, only about our situation, as long as I don't have experience in another ecosystem. But yeah, like, for example, about the Bahariya oasis, the native species, and also the species that most of the people are growing. So first of all, it's of course date palms. So you will see plenty of them if you arrive there. Then some people still grow olive trees. There are some acacia species, the native ones. And like I said, recently jojoba became very popular because it doesn't require much care about. It's very low on irrigation, and it's produced like has a good harvest. And jojoba oil became very popular recently. And yeah, in our case, it's also, of course, any kind, like not any kind, but most kind of herbs like basil and mint and chamomile, because they're easy to grow. They kind of create a base for the organic soil matter for the future. And yeah, like you can cover a huge amount of areas with these crops. This is from my experience.
Excellent. I'm glad that we got a chance to talk about that. And I think, Ashleigh, you had an idea for us as well.
Yeah. So Neil Spackman, who some of you may know, did a restoration project in Saudi Arabia, where there weren't any plants growing there, as far as I know. It was all just rock. And he experimented with a number of different species, using a system for selecting them called climate analogues, which is where you look at where your ecosystem is, or your plot of land is, latitudinally, and you essentially look at where else in the world there's a similar climate to what you are working with. And then he just did lots of experiments to see which species would work well. He started irrigating them, I think, in the beginning, and then cut irrigation to see which ones would survive. And I know he used different acacias, and he also used moringa quite a lot. Can't remember exactly which other species, but if you look up his project online, I can put it in the chat now. It's called Albeda. He has a lot of information. How do you spell it? Albeda. Oh, that might not be the right spelling. Forgive me. And yeah, if you are really interested in learning how to restore dryland/desert, I recommend you taking the online course that we will be putting out there in April next year, which will go into a lot of detail about this topic.
Excellent. That's a great primer here. Now, temperature and moisture are these huge drivers for plant productivity. As this question asks, what restoration practices help get optimal plant growth when you're dealing with these high temperatures and low precipitation? It sounds like in some of your projects, you're utilizing irrigation, but also, what John said, I can imagine the answer being something to the effect of that setting up the right canopy layers of plants will help protect the lower story plants from getting too hot in there. But, I'm just curious if you have some insight into this techniques. And I think we have a lot of people who are interested in arid systems in overcoming these two big issues, that they feel it's too hot and it's too dry for things to really establish and do well.
I just want to grow those shrubs and trees so the shading can help drop the temperature down. And then in the spring and in the morning and in the evening, you will get temperature inversions such that mist forms. And if you've got the appropriate kinds of grasses growing, typically the water will condense on those stems of those grasses and right into the little pond. You need to have it right near a place where you can hold water. So little tricks that you learn at all these different places that you work.
I just want to show you something. I'm just going to put it into the chat. So there's a link to an essay I wrote called The Great Green Wall of China. And the Chinese were able to use mainly halophytes because the water that they had is brackish. And what's interesting about this is you can use it as a pioneer species. You can use halophytes as a pioneer species. And then that's not what you're going to end up with. That's what you're using to process the land. And it works very well. And you can see that they built a shelter belt through the middle of this of the Taklamakan Desert, which Taklamakan means you go in, but you don't come out. So it's completely insane conditions. But I wouldn't necessarily choose to do that. But the fact that you can do that is suggesting that we will not have too much trouble in the Sinai Peninsula to restore ecological function, especially with Dr. Elaine bringing over the inoculations to grow the microbes and the fungal communities as fast as possible. So I look forward to that.
Great. Well, we have almost come to the end of our time here together, and I want to be respectful of people's schedules. So I wish we could have gotten to more direct questions from the audience, but there are ways for them for you in the audience to send those in to the Soil Food Web, and that's actually probably going to fall on me to try to find those answers for you. But I love doing that. I always learn new things. So yeah, I just wanted to say, like, any closing thoughts here as we come to the top of the hour that we could leave with the audience, or do we just want to tell them, goodbye and happy restoration?
See you back here soon.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure. I been getting a lot of energy from you all and can feel your excitement and that Makes me really happy.
Thank
I
you.
like
Yeah, thank you.
I like what Adam said. Let's fall in love with the earth. So have a good
True.
time.
Thank you, everyone. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you, and thank
And
you to the
peace.
technical people who made this happen in the background.
Oh,
too.
absolutely. Here at Soil Food Web School, we could not do without the many people who are supporting us in the background and giving us a chance to focus on these wonderful questions and discussions together. So thanks to Sammy and the rest of the crew today, and we look
Alex.
forward to working with everybody.
Okie doke. Ciao.
Cheers.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Don't forget to click that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell to stay updated with all our new videos.